Billionaire stunned when waitress utters father's name, a shocking truth exposed after 25 years. The door jingled lightly as Daniel Grayson stepped into the diner, the warmth of the surroundings settling on him like an unexpected embrace. He was a man of concrete achievements and towering wealth, yet here he found solace amongst chipped mugs and vinyl seats, clinging to the last vestiges of humility. After a long day engulfed in boardroom battles and tech negotiations, crammed with the polished glories of his billion-dollar empire, he craved a moment of reprieve from his high-stakes world. Sarah greeted him with a bright smile, the kind that filtered through her tired eyes, soothing his frayed nerves momentarily. As she poured coffee into his cup, the aroma evoked memories of his father, a mechanic who spent his life under the hoods of beaten-down cars, tirelessly working yet forever confined to a life of unfulfilled dreams. The juxtaposition was stark. Bumps and bruises of a modest life contrasted with the sleek lines of luxury that defined Daniel's existence. He couldn't help but feel the weight of that unrelenting armor of success that he wore, a shield crafted from years of escape, barring anyone from touching the raw wounds of his childhood. But as he sipped the hot coffee, Sarah uttered a name, casual yet penetrating, that shattered the fragile cocoon he had spun around himself, his father's name. "My dad was just like yours, you know. Always trying to make it better for us." Her voice trailed off, but the impact was immediate. His heart raced, emotions swirling into a vortex of memories. This woman, with a name and a past, had stumbled into the heart of his life, where resentment and longing wrestled for dominance. Suddenly, questions bubbled up within him. Who was his father beyond the label of failure he had given him? Why had he never taken the time to understand the man who had shaped him in ways he chose to abandon? Daniel wanted to dismiss her words, to silence the calling of the heart, but it grew louder as he listened to Sarah share stories of her struggles and dreams for her children, stories dripping with a certain warmth he had long forgotten. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let us continue. As the conversation grew, the threads of their lives began to intertwine in ominous ways. Hints dropped like heavy weights, revealing connections that were both unsettling and intriguing. Could she possibly know more about his father? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The years of pent-up anger and neglect boiled within him, fueled by a fierce yearning for closure that had never been addressed. He faced a colossal internal storm. What if confronting this truth only dug deeper into the wounds of his childhood? And yet, he thought of Sarah's children, innocent souls whose potential he could not help but admire. They deserved a shot, a chance for something more than the meager beginnings both he and Sarah had known. What would it mean if he chose to navigate this convoluted path towards understanding, to honor a legacy he had spent a lifetime scornfully dismissing? Tension thickened in the air, the diner's warm light feeling suddenly oppressive as the answers loomed ahead, uncharted responses teetering on the brink of revelation. He clutched his coffee cup tighter, the bitterness mingling with the familiar ache of his past like a cruel reminder of the choices that led him to this moment. What lay ahead felt both terrifying and tantalizing, the air electrified with the possibility of finally unearthing the truth about his father and himself. But just as Sarah revealed a whisper of a secret, something authentic, something that could redefine the essence of their connection, a profound silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken words and endless implications. Daniel was left caught between paths unseen, where the comfortable lies of his life began to crumble, inviting him into an abyss of shocking truths he had never anticipated. What would he choose when faced with the ultimate reckoning of family and the very nature of true wealth? The silence stretched between them, an unbreakable tether binding Daniel to the questions that hovered just beyond the reach of his words. He felt the pressure building, an urgency that demanded he peel back layers he had spent a lifetime fortifying. The weight in his chest grew heavier with every glance exchanged between him and Sarah, whose eyes shimmered with the story of her father, an echo of the man who had lived under the same sun, choking on dreams obstructed by circumstance. What did you mean? Daniel finally asked, his voice raspy as if the very act of confronting the truth frightened him. You said your dad was like mine. Sarah paused, the brief intake of breath momentarily filling the diner with a charged silence. He struggled too, she began, but he never let it stop him from hoping. It's what drove him every single day. He raised us like he could change the world. The contrast stung him. His own father had been resigned, trapped in a cycle of hardship that Daniel resolutely swore he would escape. Yet, sitting across from Sarah, he felt something inexorably shifting deep within him, an unsettling compassion for the man he had sworn not to emulate. That he leaned forward, trying to grasp the unraveling threads of her narrative. What if I told you I've spent years shunning that part of myself? I've built this empire, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I am. His voice cracked. It was here in this diner, surrounded by the quotidian aspects of life, that he felt the weight of every moment spent alienating himself from his past. Sometimes confronting our truth is the hardest thing we can do, she replied gently, her sincerity tugging at the very core of his identity. But it's also where we find the strength we didn't know we had. Each word hung in the air like a sword of revelation, daring him to plunge further into the unknown. He couldn't shake the image of his father, disillusioned, perhaps, but never having ceased to dream of a better tomorrow. As his mind raced, Daniel felt the previously solid foundations of his constructs beginning to erode, exposing vulnerable truths. The hardened facade of a ruthless businessman was crumbling, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that wealth alone could not fill the void left by his father's absence. What made you who you are? He blurted, grappling not just for answers about her life but searching for reflections of his own. Was it out of regret for things left unsaid? Or something else? Hope, she replied with a hint of tremor in her voice. It was the will to change the narrative for my children, to give them roots and wings. I wanted more for them than I ever had. Isn't that why we strive? Suddenly, he was struck by the clarity of her words, feeling the urge to defy the discord that shrouded his upbringing. The desire to connect and understand was now intertwining with his ambition. Perhaps it was time to confront the indisputable truth of his father's legacy, not just for closure, but for the sake of his own humanity. With that realization, the familiar pang of determination ignited within him. No longer could he afford to suffocate his own history under the weight of success. The path ahead felt daunting yet inviting, promising a chance to engage with the pieces of his life he often relegated to shadows. Maybe it's time I did something different, he finally ventured, a newfound resolve coating his words. The time has come to face not just my past, but also the future I want to create. As Sarah offered him a nod of affirmation, something stirred within Daniel, a flicker of hope merging with the weight of responsibility. But just as he began to formulate a plan, the phone resting in his pocket vibrated insistently, a stark reminder that the world beyond the diner was unforgiving, always clamoring for his attention. What awaited him on the other end of the line could complicate everything he just resolved to embrace, drawing an unyielding line between personal growth and the demands of his billionaire status. The long shadow of his professional world loomed over this profound personal awakening, leaving him to question whether he could balance both realms or if one would ultimately sacrifice the other. The choices ahead unraveled before him in a tension-filled array of possibilities, where society's expectations and his own desires collided. Only time would tell which path he would choose to follow. The phone's persistent vibration cut through Daniel's moment of clarity, snapping him back to the present. It felt like a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters of his thoughts, dragging him away from the profound revelations that had begun to take shape. He glanced at the screen, a familiar name glaring back: Tom Gibbons, his most trusted advisor. An uneasy knot formed in his stomach as he answered. Daniel here, he said, striving for an air of calmness that he didn't feel. His heart thudded in his chest, colliding with the desperate urge to flee back into the sanctuary of introspection. Hey, Daniel. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk about the Henderson deal. Tom's voice was steady, but Daniel could sense the urgency layered within his words. What could possibly be so pressing? He pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the stress of the impending negotiations tugging at his sense of self. Right now?" he asked, his tone betraying a flicker of annoyance. "Yes, right now. I need you to make final adjustments before our meeting tomorrow. This deal holds substantial stakes, and—" Tom continued, but Daniel's mind drifted, glossing over the specifics. All at once, he felt shackled by the expectations of his role, suffocating beneath the weight of reliable efficiency that he had built to sustain his empire. "Let us schedule a time later to discuss," Daniel finally interjected, grappling with the shifts inside him that felt more significant than any business deal. "I can't focus on that right now." He hung up before Tom could protest, returning to Sarah, whose presence anchored him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Her understanding gaze met his chaos with unwavering resolve. "What is going on?" she asked softly, concern lacing the edges of her voice. "It's this damn business," he replied, frustration seeping into the words. "I thought I could step away, dive into my own history, and maybe even find myself. But this," he gestured with a flick of his wrist, summoning the chaos of his professional world that encased him like a brittle cocoon. "It's suffocating me." "Maybe," Sarah countered, her tone gentle yet firm, "this is your opportunity, not just an interruption. What if you saw this as part of your journey instead of a diversion?" Her words hung between them, both challenging and liberating. Could he really intertwine his personal growth with his entrepreneurial spirit? The idea seemed both radical and terrifying. "I won't lie, it feels impossible. It's easier to cut everything off, to draw strict lines between who I am in business and who I want to be," he admitted, a deep sense of longing clawing at his core. "Life isn't meant to be compartmentalized," she replied, her eyes searching his. "It's messy, and sometimes it requires us to wrestle with both responsibilities and our truths. You can redefine what success means to you." As if igniting a rudimentary fuse, her words sparked a transformative fire within him. He began to consider not merely what he was building for himself, but how he could bridge the gap between his past and present. Suddenly, a pang of regret flickered in his heart. If he let the professional pressure consume him, would he risk losing the burgeoning bond with Sarah? Would he allow old patterns to dictate his future? "No," he vowed softly, stepping back mentally from the precipice of old habits. He straightened, fortified by a burgeoning determination. What if I approached this deal everything with a new perspective? What if I used my experience to redefine my approach and dismantle the rigid constructs that have bound me? "Yes," she replied, a smile dancing at the corners of her mouth. "That's the spirit. Embrace your past, but don't let it control you." As the weight of the decision loomed ahead, he caught another vibration, this time a notification from his business account data regarding the acquisition. His heart raced as he considered the implications. What if renegotiating this deal aligned with his personal mission, increasing opportunities to engage people beyond just profit? Daniel stood at a crossroads. The demands of his success beckoned him to falter, to retreat, yet the voice of hope whispered, urging him to step forward. The dual nature of his life clenched him in a vice. Could he emerge from this infusion of self-discovery without letting his business crumble? The stakes had never felt so high, intertwining his personal evolution with the relentless pursuit of his professional aspirations. Just as he began to make lists in his mind, a thought struck an unpleasant truth that had evaded him until now. Was he ready to confront the fallout of his past decisions? To risk it all to redefine himself on his own terms? The world around him blurred, and the answer stood tantalizingly within reach. One last thought, one last realization, stuck in his throat like a bitter pill. This was only the beginning. The real question still lay ahead, waiting patiently in the shadows. What did it mean to embrace his past fully, and at what cost? As he faced those truths, Daniel could feel the tide shifting. But the undeniable confrontation still awaited, looming large and daunting. The haunting echo of voices that had yet to be reconciled began to rise within him. The morning sun slashed through the shades, scattering light across Daniel's desk. He blinked against the brightness, feeling the weight of night's revelation still resting heavily on his shoulders. Today was different. He had resolved to not just tackle the Henderson deal but to infuse it with the authenticity of his journey. A quick glance at the clock reminded him of the meeting that loomed, its shadow over him more oppressive than usual. But instead of succumbing to anxiety, he outlined his intentions, scribbling notes on a fresh legal pad. Each word was a stake driven into the ground, a declaration of the man he wanted to be, an articulation of two worlds he hoped to unite. That he focused on the deal. What if every negotiation could reflect a piece of his truth? What if he could turn the sterile boardroom into a realm of stories, where numbers and metrics danced alongside narratives of growth and purpose? Daniel felt a small spark of excitement, a pulse beneath his skin igniting with the thought of possibilities. That he met Tom in the conference room where the air was thick with a blend of urgency and expectation. Tom was already laid out with his laptop, charts spread before him like soldiers ready for battle. "Daniel, good, you're here." His tone carried uncertainty, and Daniel could sense the trepidation in his voice. "Tom," Daniel began, his own voice steady yet infused with newfound courage. "We need to shift how we approach this negotiation. It's about more than profit margins. This deal can create lasting relationships." Tom blinked, processing the shift. "Are you sure about this? The Hendersons are tough negotiators. They'll expect traditional tactics." "Exactly," Daniel replied, leaning against the table, ready to step into a fray he had always shied away from in favor of cold calculations. "That's why we shock them with authenticity. Let's show them that we're not just after their business, we want to build something together." The idea hung in the air like a ripe fruit, waiting to be plucked. Tom's brow furrowed as he considered. "It's risky, but it just might work. How do you envision this?" In that instant, Daniel channeled Sarah's encouragement. He not only envisioned it but felt it swell within him, the warmth of connection, the exhilaration of shared ambition. "Let us present a story," he said. "Not numbers, but the vision. We paint the future we want to create together. We approach this as collaborators, not adversaries." An unfamiliar energy surged through him. Was this what it felt like to chart new waters aligned with purpose? He could see Tom begin to align, the clouds of skepticism dissipating. "All right," he said slowly, "let us try it your way. But we'll need to have solid data backing the ideas or they might dismiss us." "Of course," Daniel nodded, exhilaration hitting a new high. "But every number we provide will tie back to our vision. It'll resonate with them not just as a transaction but as a partnership." The meeting felt different. It had become a platform for ideas rather than just a battleground for financial gain. As he rehearsed his approach with Tom during the walk to their offices, Daniel's heart raced not with apprehension but with an invigorating sense of purpose. He realized that embracing his past, acknowledging his fears, and merging them into his professional persona wasn't merely a strategy, it was his evolution. However, beneath the excitement lay an unsettling question. Was he merely postponing the confrontation with unresolved voices from his past? The echoes of familial expectations, past disappointments, and shadows of bitterness loomed larger, reminding him of the complexity coiled tightly within him. His mind wandered back to childhood lessons, the ambitions his father had instilled in him, the pride and disdain forged in equal measure. What would his father think of this new Daniel, who questioned old assumptions and dismissed rigid structures? Would he see him as a weakling, straying from a path that promised traditional success? Or would he finally understand that Daniel was, at long last, owning his story? As they entered the conference room for the negotiations, he felt the duality within him fork silently. There it was, the opportunity to bridge his pseudo-confidence with vulnerability and create genuine connections. Yet, wrapped tightly around that ambition was also the haunting fear of judgment. Could he truly unveil the man he aspired to be amidst these power brokers, or would he succumb to the ghosts of his ambitions past? The room buzzed with anticipation, but Daniel stood still, poised on the edge of self-revelation, uncertainty swirling around him like a storm. And as the Hendersons entered, that unyielding question lingered: would he risk unraveling what he thought made him successful in the eyes of others, or would he finally step into the light of his own truth? As the door swung open, Daniel felt the familiar pulse of pressure. This was his moment, a crossroads not just for the business at stake but for himself. Which path would he choose, and at what cost would the truth be revealed? Daniel's heart raced as he watched the Hendersons file into the conference room, their faces betraying nothing. The tension in the air felt electric, a current of unspoken stakes mingling with the shadows of his past fears. He took a steadying breath, aware that this was not just a pivotal negotiation but a rare opportunity to reshape how he engaged with the world and himself. As they settled in, the Hendersons exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. Daniel's mind flickered with fragments of his past, a childhood spent under the watchful eye of a father whose vision for success was as fixed as the horizon. Today, however, he was not merely stepping into a role crafted by another's expectations, he was crafting his own narrative, piecing together a version of success that felt authentic to him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. He caught Tom's eye, and for a fleeting moment, their shared resolve pulsed between them like a lifeline. "We're excited to discuss the potential partnership between our companies, but I think it's crucial we start by understanding one another beyond our spreadsheets and projections." As soon as he finished, Daniel saw the skepticism on the Hendersons' faces. A slight furrow creased Mr. Henderson's brow, and the room felt suddenly smaller, the walls inching closer. Here it was the critical juncture that would determine whether he stood for authenticity or retreated into the comfort of conventionality. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect," interrupted Ms. Henderson, her tone bordering on challenging, "our meetings typically focus on figures and projections. What makes you think a narrative will resonate with us?" Her question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. In a heartbeat, Daniel felt a rush of doubt ripple through him. The voices of his past whispered viciously, questioning his worthiness, signaling the slipperiness of vulnerability. "Because," he said, galvanizing the conviction that had sparked in him that morning, "the success of this partnership hinges on more than just numbers. It's about trust, shared values, and a vision that connects us. Let me show you." He waved his hand dismissively over the charts and tables before focusing on the Hendersons. "For a moment, forget the profit margins. Imagine our companies collaborating on projects that touch lives. What can we learn from this partnership that goes beyond balance sheets?" He watched as the impatience on their faces waned, curiosity flickering between them like a spark jumping through the air. Daniel pressed onward, emboldened by their shifting demeanor. He wove together stories from his upbringing, candidly drawing parallels between his life experiences and the guiding principles of their business. "The truth is, growing up I learned to revere success as defined by others," he admitted. "It took me time to understand that my story with all its complexities is a vital part of who I am. And only by sharing it can we nurture something greater together." The moment felt suspended in time, a delicate balance of vulnerability and ambition. He dared not look at Tom, fearful that a glance might unravel his composure. Instead, he directed his energy toward the Hendersons, reading the minutiae of their expressions. Was there interest? Doubt? Engagement? Something had shifted. "Interesting perspective," Mr. Henderson finally replied, a hint of intrigue lacing his skepticism. "But how do you back that up with actionable goals?" "By ensuring our initiatives reflect our commitment," Daniel responded, feeling the momentum spike. "We can align our resources to support community-based projects or innovate solutions that directly impact lives while holding ourselves accountable to measurable outcomes." The conversation continued to morph, and Daniel began to feel the weight of self-doubt dissipate. He was forging connections not just with the Hendersons, but within himself. With each beat of the dialogue, he felt himself evolving, shedding the rigid skin he had worn for too long. As the meeting concluded, an unexpected camaraderie hung palpably in the air. Yet, he also felt the prickle of uncertainty creeping back. Could this newfound authenticity withstand the critical voices that were still present within him? Was his transformation legitimate, or just a fleeting performance? Daniel's internal conflict simmered beneath the surface as they wrapped up, their agreement still unsealed but budding with potential. As they shook hands, he felt like a man who had stepped through a threshold, yet, a nagging urgency remained unaddressed. What lay ahead for him? now that he had taken the courageous step to stand not just as a businessman but as a human being. As he walked from the conference room into the world outside, the pulse of anxiety tinged with exhilaration throbbed within him. When the meeting ended, Daniel caught Tom's eye, hopeful yet wary. Tom tipped his head slightly, a subtle nod acknowledging the shift. But with that nod came a new realization: despite the progress he made, the complexities of navigating his past and defining his own pathway still awaited resolution. The time had come for Daniel to face the deeper questions of his identity head-on. Would he fully embrace this compelling narrative of growth or retreat into the familiarity of old expectations? As he stepped out into the crisp air, one thought pierced through the target of his resolve. Now that he was ready to confront not just external negotiations but his internal battles as well, could he hold on to the courage needed to reshape his future? Standing on the sidewalk outside the conference building, Daniel was struck by the vividness of the world around him. The buzz of the city felt more alive, as if every sound and color vibrated with fresh potential. Yet, underneath that vivacious exterior, a storm of confusion churned within. He had tasted a glimpse of authenticity, a fleeting moment where he felt like the architect of his own life, but could he hold on to it? The meeting had sparked something in him, a relentless drive, but those embers of hope danced dangerously close to fading. He walked past other professionals engrossed in their own lives, and he couldn't shake the sensation that he was at a crossroads, each path leading either toward personal growth or slipping back into the shadow of his father's expectations. While waiting for the subway, Daniel's mind reeled. I showed them who I am, he thought, the thrill mingling with uncertainty. But what if they don't believe it? What if I don't believe it? He sensed his pulse quicken. The fear of reverting to a scripted version of himself clawed at the edges of his mind, an anxious reminder of the walls he had fought so hard to push against today. As he boarded the train, the carriage teemed with people silently absorbed in their devices, yet all Daniel could think about were the stories that had shaped him. Each conversation, every experience, felt like scattered puzzle pieces, and he now knew it was time to put them together. At the heart of all his past negotiations, be it with colleagues, clients, or himself, lay his deeply embedded desire for acceptance, yet those same dealings had also required him to mask his vulnerabilities. Suddenly, the jarring sound of the train braking jolted him back to reality. He understood now that his budding narrative demanded more than just recounting experiences, it required action. It was imperative to explore and confront the deeply entrenched perceptions that held him captive, starting with his father. Daniel recalled their last encounter vividly, the harsh words exchanged, the expectations that had chained him to an identity he never fully embraced. Perhaps it was time for a confrontation, not just professionally, but personally. He could feel a dormant resolve taking shape within him, pushing against the walls of complacency. What if he could approach his father not with defiance but with a desire for understanding? Would that empower him to reclaim his narrative? As the train doors slid open, a rush of fresh air enveloped him, invigorating his senses. There was no denying it: if he was to move forward authentically, he needed to face the myths of his past. With every step he took, the heat of determination ignited within him. Returning home, Daniel found his father's contact information buried in the depths of a neglected drawer. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the number, each digit a key to a door he had been too hesitant to unlock. He had spent years sculpting a life that aligned with others' definitions, and now it was time to sculpt one that was exclusively his own. He could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. In that instant, something shifted. He realized that the path to self-acceptance lay through vulnerability. To navigate this journey, he must allow himself both the power to confront and the courage to forgive. Raising the phone, he hovered over the call button, the weight of that decision heavy in the air. His heart raced with a cocktail of hope and trepidation. Would it alter the course of his relationship with his father, or would it merely deepen the chasm? The question loomed over him: could he dismantle the walls built by years of misunderstanding? Or would he discover that reconciliation required a reconciliation with himself first? As he breathed deeply, he pressed the button, and the ringing sounded like a tolling bell, a call to a deeper exploration of identity that would challenge him beyond anything he had faced to date. And as he listened to the ringing, a thought crystallized: perhaps the act of confronting his past might reveal revelations previously obscured, both about his father and about himself. The phone rang, the sound amplifying the silence in Daniel's cramped apartment. He felt every vibration travel through his palm, becoming a raw reminder of the bridge he was about to cross. With each ring, the adrenaline surged, hope battled skepticism within him like an unanswered question craving resolution. The call connected. Daniel's heart pounded, and he hesitated, telling himself to breathe. "You can do this," he thought as the familiar voice on the other end broke through his thoughts. His father's tone, authoritative yet distant, sent waves of conflicting emotions flooding through him. The years stretched thin between them, memories tainted with resentment and longing intermingling in his mind. "Daniel," his father said, sounding more surprised than anything. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "Yeah, well, it's been a while," Daniel replied, his voice betraying his nerves. He felt like a child again, confronted by the weight of expectations. "Can we talk?" There was a hesitation. Daniel sensed his father weighing the implications, the uncharted territory that lay ahead. "About what?" he asked, careful and cautious, just as Daniel had anticipated. "I thought we should discuss us," Daniel began. Each word felt like a fragile step on unfamiliar ground. "About everything." He waited, heart racing as silence stretched on. The promise of catharsis he envisioned faced the harsh reality of being vulnerable. With every heartbeat, he considered the possibility of acceptance that hung in the air, paired with the certainty of opposition. The lines of tension in his throat tightened as his father finally answered, "What do you mean? You were never interested in my views before." Something simmered within Daniel, a flash of defiance he needed to keep in check. "I want to understand why things are the way they are. Why I feel so lost when I should feel accomplished." He could feel the walls he had carefully constructed crumbling as he spoke. "Why do I feel like I'm living someone else's life?" There was no immediate response, and the weight of the question settled heavily between them. Daniel could almost envision the gears turning in his father's mind, the surprise and perhaps a flicker of vulnerability. "Do you even know what you want?" His father shot back, the edge of impatience lacing his words. "I want to know myself," Daniel replied, feeling a rush of clarity. "I want to understand who I am without your expectations, without your shadow. I want to step away from what you think I should be." His father's silence felt like a wall growing taller, yet Daniel couldn't back down. He had initiated the conversation, one that threatened to dismantle years of complex emotions and unresolved conflicts. "I allowed myself to be defined by you for so long. But I'm done with that. I've tried to provide you with everything, Daniel," his father retorted, voice becoming heavy with defensiveness. "All I did was want a better life for you, a life you didn't seem to value." "That's just it." Daniel's voice rose, fueled by frustration. "I never wanted the life you built for me, it's your version. I need to carve my own path. Can't you see that? Can't you support that?" The vulnerability carved within him felt both painful and liberating. He was confronting his father not just in defiance but seeking a shared understanding. He wanted a connection that had eluded them for years, but just as he felt the adrenaline of truth spill forth, his father's silence morphed into something menacing: anger, defensiveness, and perhaps confusion bundled in a voice that enveloped him entirely. "You think you know better? You think you can just dismiss everything I've sacrificed for you?" "I'm not dismissing anything," Daniel said quickly but earnestly. "I just want to break free of the notion that your sacrifices define my worth. I need you to realize that this is my life to lead." As the words hung in the air, Daniel understood he might be opening the floodgates to an avalanche of old wounds that demanded to be aired. The conversation could either lead to a breakthrough or plunging them further into the abyss of misunderstanding. The stakes had escalated, and he felt the sides of reality shifting beneath them both. How far could he push for understanding without losing everything he was fighting for? And as the silence thickened, Daniel braced himself for the fallout, knowing the next moments would define not just their relationship but himself as he began to anchor himself in this new identity he was forging. Would this confrontation yield the understanding he sought, or would it fracture them further, spiraling into unknown chaos? The weight of Daniel's tension hung heavy in the air, his heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. He could feel the silence straining between him and his father, the words unsaid threatening to crack the fragile dam holding them together. Was this truly the moment when he finally gained clarity, or would it merely deepen the chasm they both spent years navigating? "Everything I did was for your future," his father finally replied, the sharpness in his tone betraying an undercurrent of hurt. "I wanted you to succeed in ways I never could." "Is that so wrong?" Daniel clenched his fists, the frustration blossoming anew. "I never asked for those sacrifices. I just wanted your support, not a blueprint for a life you envisioned." "Do you even hear me? Support? What about my desires, my expectations for you? You've wasted years living in a bubble that you created." His father's voice escalated, revealing a hint of the fear hidden beneath the hardened facade. Daniel took a deep breath, wrestling with the torrent of emotions battling against the resolve he had summoned for this confrontation. "I'm not wasting them. I'm figuring out who I am sans your ambitions." A beat passed, and for an instant, something flickered in his father's eyes, a glimmer of recognition paired with simmering anger. "You think you're the only one who has been lost? Every choice I made was in the hopes you would avoid the same pitfalls. You think my life was easy?" The rawness of their exchange laid bare their vulnerabilities, two men struggling to connect across vast chasms of misunderstanding. It was simultaneously freeing and terrifying. "I know it wasn't easy," Daniel admitted, softening his tone. "But I wish you'd shared that with me instead of shaping me as if I were clay to mold. I didn't need a perfect son, I needed a father." The silence returned, but now it was more contemplative than confrontational. Daniel seized the moment, opening his heart in ways he hadn't dared before. "I can't keep living under what you've built," he continued. "Do you know how that limits me? How it suffocates the dreams I have?" His father's rigid stance seemed to waver, the familiar mask of authority slipping. "What do you want, then?" The question hung heavy, filled with unasked worries that had lived beneath the surface for too long. "I want to understand what my dreams look like. I need space to explore without your shadow looming. I want to know if I can have your faith in my choices, even if they differ from your vision," Daniel confessed, his voice steady with newfound conviction. Each syllable resonated, igniting an urgency within him. This wasn't merely a call for acceptance, it was a plea for connection. He could feel his resolve crystallizing, layers of confusion shedding as clarity emerged. But with each intimate confession, he sensed his father's internal battle between his deep-seated desire to protect and the unsettling realization that the chains of past expectations were tightening. Would his father meet him halfway, or would the walls continue to fortify? In that silence, Daniel wrestled with the paradox of freedom versus connection. What came next would either propel them toward a closer reconciliation or tear them further apart. He had forged this path, laying down the first stone toward rediscovery, and yet uncertainty loomed large. "And what if I cannot support your vision?" His father finally whispered, the vulnerability stark against his earlier bravado. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. "Then I'll forge ahead on my own," he asserted, schooling his expression to remain earnest. "But what if?" The words trailed off, leaving a chasm of possibility hanging in the air, thick with tension. As Daniel's gaze met his father's, the stakes amplified, an invisible thread stretched taut, waiting to snap or bind them together in understanding. Would they stand as two individuals seeking reconciliation, or was the rift too wide to bridge? At that moment, Daniel understood, the journey of the next few minutes could define not only their future relationship but his own emerging identity. How far would he have to go to break the cycle? And more importantly, did he possess the courage to venture forward into the unknown? He braced himself, sensing the tide shifting, anticipating the looming truth that would either bind or separate them. The moment had arrived to discover if they could emerge stronger or if the weight of their shared past would swallow them whole. The air seemed to thrum with the unvoiced anxiety that hung between them. Daniel's heart pounded as he steadied himself, realizing this pivotal moment could tilt the balance of his life towards self-discovery or its opposite, reinforcement of the bonds he'd strived to sever. His father's expression flickered, the hardened lines of his face faltering with uncertainty. Daniel saw the cogs of his father's mind shifting, weighing his own childhood burdens against Daniel's burgeoning independence. It was almost tangible, the struggle for power and vulnerability waging war in their eyes. Maybe we should start over," Daniel suggested, the words a tentative bridge laid across the chasm. "But it needs to be on my terms. You have to allow me the freedom to navigate my own path." "Start over?" his father repeated, voice tight with incredulity. "You think that's possible? After everything?" Daniel allowed himself a breath, bracing for the implications of his own challenge. "I do. Because I want to discover what I'm capable of, not merely what I am in your eyes. Sometimes I think you don't see me at all." That remark landed heavily, and for a heartbeat, he caught a hint of silence, a reflection pooling between them, revealing the truths they had skirted around for years. "I see you different," his father replied finally, the warmth of yearning creeping into the rigid tones of his voice. "I wanted so much for you. Maybe too much. Maybe, yes," Daniel found a rhythm to his own assertiveness now. "But wanting isn't seeing. What if I take a risk, venturing into the unknown while you step back? Can we trust each other to meet in a space where I'm not just your son, but a person deserving of my choices?" His father flinched at the word but didn't retreat. Instead, he fell into contemplation, a complex tapestry of fear and aspiration weaving across his brow. "And what if your choices lead to nothing? What then?" "Then I learn," Daniel said simply. "Isn't that what this is about? I can't measure my potential against your dreams. I need to risk failure to discover my true self." Taking a step closer, he continued with fragile intensity, "What was your dream, Dad? Was it the corporate ladder, the perfect job? Or was it a bond with your son that doesn't hinge on success?" The question hung, heavy with possibility. Daniel felt a shift, his father's hands clenched momentarily before loosening, revealing a fleeting vulnerability. "This isn't easy for me," he admitted. "I trained myself to believe that the world would consume you if I didn't push you. And I've trained myself to believe that the world can't consume me if I don't step out of your shadow," Daniel countered. "This? What we're doing right now, it might actually be our first true dialogue." A flicker of understanding shone through the furrows on his father's face, a whisper of possibility. This was the beginning of something uneasy yet transformative. "If I agree to this, to your terms, what does it mean for us?" He regarded Daniel, moments of shared history swirling anew in his scrutiny. "It means we both step onto uncharted territory," Daniel replied, adrenaline surging through him, filled with the raw courage of confronting several fears simultaneously. "We redefine who we are, not as father and son confined by expectations, but as two individuals with their own stories." Two individuals. The look of incredulity broke momentarily, making room for curiosity. "Yes," Daniel affirmed. "Let us explore that." As he spoke the words, Daniel felt a surge of empowerment flooding through him. The air was thick, charged with the potential for change. He waited, feeling the pulse of that delicate thread between them, uncertain of its strength or endurance, yet yearning for the chance to pull on it with unrelenting force. His father's brow furrowed as he processed the gravity of his own perceptions crumbling. "And what if I can't let go? What if I still want to lead you?" "Then we'll have to confront that together," Daniel said, voice steady. "But know this, if it comes down to choosing between our relationship and my freedom, I'll choose freedom. We have to find a way to coexist without suffocation." The words, sharp and disarming, floated into the charged silence, the stakes escalated to a point of no return. "Freedom," his father murmured, the taste of it unfamiliar yet intriguing. Could they navigate this uncharted space together? They hovered on a precipice, a fragile moment filled with both fear and the thrill of unprecedented possibility. Just then, the door creaked open, shattering their carefully built tension. "Excuse me," but a timid voice interrupted, drawing their immediate attention. Daniel's thoughts swirled as the intruder stepped beyond the threshold, carrying a revelation that could change everything. What could this newcomer mean for their fragile agreement? The unexpected presence of the young woman, slightly anxious but with an undeniable spark in her eyes, took both Daniel and his father by surprise. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said softly, "but I couldn't help overhearing. My name is Emily, and I'm here on behalf of an organization focused on rebuilding ties across strained familial relationships." The room grew silent, tension hanging heavier than before. Daniel and his father exchanged a quick glance, each processing what the interruption meant for their critical conversation. Would this be a moment of distraction or an opportunity for actual change? Daniel felt curiosity bubbling up, wondering how someone from the outside could potentially guide their emerging dialogue. "Perhaps I can offer a fresh perspective," Emily continued, looking between them with earnestness. "I represent a project that emphasizes understanding and reconciliation. Oftentimes, those who dare to tread into the uncharted territory of vulnerability can discover healing in unexpected ways." Daniel's heart raced. The notion resonated deeply with him, but would his father be receptive to this unanticipated intrusion? Yet, sensing the opening, he seized the moment. "We were just beginning to explore that territory," he said to Emily, "but it's been tough to bridge the distance created by years of expectations." "That is precisely the challenge," Emily acknowledged, her demeanor calm. "Our experiences, especially tied to family dynamics, can imprint narratives that feel permanent, even though they are often fluid. They can be rewritten." Daniel felt a spark of hope swell within him. Would they really have a chance to dismantle the burdens they had carried so far? "What do you mean by rewriting?" he asked, leaning forward, encouraging his father to engage with the concept as well. Emily's gaze softened as she shared, "It's about recognizing that every person holds a complex story. Often, we find that the things we resist the most are the very things that could bring us together. For example, what if you both could illuminate those things you wish you'd done differently? Seeing those regrets may foster an understanding that paves the way to compassion." The gravity of her words weighed on them. Daniel took a breath, recognizing the truth ringing clear. "Perhaps that's what we've been avoiding," he admitted slowly. "The candid conversation about not just our successes but our failures too." His father's expression wavered, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability. "I know I haven't always been present in the way that you needed, Daniel," he said, voice low. "And I haven't been able to admit that. It always felt like a failure to consider a softer side of myself." Daniel felt a warmth spreading through him. With each acknowledgement, they were dismantling old assumptions, brick by brick. "It's never too late to change the narrative," he said, encouraging his father. "We can reshape our relationship into one built on understanding rather than projections of who we think we ought to be." As Emily observed their exchange, a smile crept onto her face. "Acknowledging pain can stimulate growth and healing as you move forward. It's like planting seeds, nurturing them means allowing space for both roots and blossoms." A moment of silent contemplation ensued. Daniel's father seemed lost in thought, perhaps reflecting on the weight of years spent protecting an outcome rather than connecting. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Maybe, it's time for a new beginning, without the old weight tied to expectations." Daniel felt a rush of exhilaration at the prospect of transformation. It was an affirmation of his heart's yearning. "If we commit to this together, we can discover more about ourselves and ultimately strengthen our bond," he said earnestly. "Yes, together," his father echoed with a new resolve, the solemnity of the moment grounding him. Emily nodded approvingly, sensing the shift that had manifested. "I'd be honored to assist you both as you navigate this journey. Sometimes, the first steps taken in unfamiliar waters lead to the most fulfilling destinations." With the air of uncertainty beginning to dissipate, Daniel turned his gaze back to his father. "Are you willing to explore this with me? To rediscover what it means to be father and son, while embracing who we both truly are?" His father met his gaze, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes, a reconciliatory light, a new understanding. "I am," he said, resolutely. "I'm ready to explore those uncharted waters with you." Daniel could feel a palpable wave of relief wash over him. They were beginning anew, not just as father and son but as individuals eager to forge a path of authenticity together. Then let us start rewriting our narrative, Daniel declared, filled with the exhilarating promise of change. In that small, dimly lit room, amidst painful histories and whispered hopes, they had found the courage to confront their past, help in hand. Daniel felt a profound sense of validation, the liberation of embracing one's identity alongside the motivations of family. This newfound understanding was more than just a moment, it was a commitment to continual growth that extended beyond the bounds of personal ambition. In the days that followed, Daniel took each step hand in hand with his father, both weathering storms and nurturing growth. The barriers slowly crumbled, giving way to vulnerability, a strength that anchored them through life's ebbs and flows, and as they embarked on this journey together, Daniel felt the exhilarating pulse of potential surging through him. This was his moment of genuine achievement, not merely in business, but as a son redefining his identity and a father opening the door to genuine connection. The narrative had begun anew, radiating joyously with the promise of transformation. You need to subscribe now to witness more extraordinary stories of personal growth. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to elevate our reach. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about Daniel's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread the message of overcoming challenges together.